You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is a communications trainer and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share it with friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Alper, I have a topic on my mind today I want to pick your brain about. Recently, we had a guest on the podcast, Abru Demirel, and she talked about not taking an audience member's criticism personally when you're giving a presentation. And you mentioned that also this morning, that was also on your mind, that topic was also on your mind. So I wanted to ask you, what are you thinking about that topic these days?
Well, the main point that I was thinking is about the importance of not taking things personally when the points in your presentations are questioned.
Okay.
Because the points are on the table, not you as a person. But
okay.
At the end of the day, when we deliver presentations, what are we doing? We're there to share like some important, especially in the business presentations, we're sharing some important information and ideas. But it's perfectly normal to sometimes feel like we need to prove not only the points that we're making, but also why we are the right person to be talking. But I have a feeling that...
Let me back you up a second. We see a lot of time clients think that if there is some opposition or some criticism in my presentation, then somehow my presentation skills must not be adequate. There must be something that was missing in my presentation skills that somehow allowed this criticism to happen. What are your thoughts about that?
I would say at that point, it would be crucially important to distinguish between what we just talked about. When you receive that criticism, let's imagine for the sake of argument that the criticism is coming towards you in the shape of, let's say, light source. I don't know. That's just the idea that came to my mind. You're standing on the stage, your slides are behind you, the words are hanging in the air, and then there is your body on the stage.
True.
I think it would be crucially important to realize that the energy of the criticism is landing on the words in the air, maybe the data that you're showing behind you, but not as you as the person standing in front of those people. But when we cannot make that distinction, I think we fall into the trap of needing to justify ourselves, not only in the points that we're making. We can talk about that. Of course, we need to be able to justify the points that we're making, but as a person, like we might want to talk about our background, our skills, or why we have enough expertise to talk about this, and to give the idea that I am the right person to talk about this. But at that moment, the criticism may not be even about you. In fact, most probably than not, it's not about you in the first place. The problem is when I invest too much on justifying myself or showing that I am the right person to speak, it can actually take away from my main points.
Okay. How's that?
Well, as the person, I may, instead of focusing on the important information, let's say, that I'm sharing, I might come off as a person trying too hard to prove myself. And instead of focusing on the facts or the ideas that I should be talking about, I may start talking about myself, my credentials, or my background.
So let me see if I'm following you correctly. So you're basically saying if there is some criticism from the audience, if one of the audience members is criticizing your idea, so you as a speaker might jump to the position of taking it personally. The criticism is against me, and somehow I'm going to overcome it by talking about my background or my knowledge or whatever, when actually that wasn't at all what the audience member was thinking. Maybe the audience member was thinking something that it's not personal about you at all. Maybe it's about the idea that you're
Yes,
exactly. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. At the end of the day, the presentations that we do, at least in the business environment, it's mostly about why do we do them? We're trying to solve a problem or make a decision based on data and logic. So I understand that the emotions are at play, but I also believe criticism, or let's say questions that maybe arise during the presentation, they are first of all, they are usually a sign that the audience is engaged. I mean, imagine you do the presentation, there are no questions or there is absolutely no criticism.
That's a great point. There are a lot
like
of people,
complete silence at the end of your speech.
Yeah, and that's a great point. A lot of people see criticism as strictly negative, but here you're kind of taking the tack that it's actually kind of sort of a positive sign that your audience is engaged with whatever idea you're talking about. Is that correct?
Yeah, they might just want to clarify the points that you're making, or maybe explore some other points of views, and not necessarily attacking you as an individual.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So let's say, for example, I'm up there and I'm giving a presentation. I'm up in front of the room or on the stage or whatever, and I'm giving a presentation. And somebody in the audience has an objection, or a bunch of them have an objection of, somehow an objection comes up, an objection of some sort. How do I know? Is there a way that I can tell? Like, if I'm wondering, okay, is the objection about me or is the objection about the idea? Should I take this personally or should I just not take it personally? What do you think about that? Is there a way to tell?
I think, yes, we can take a couple of steps or a couple of different approaches to that situation. And the first one would probably involve the scenario that I talked about, like freezing the frame, let's say, when the criticism, or let's say the critical, maybe potentially critically sounding question arises, and listen actively. I mean, we can truly try to understand and hear what is being said from this person. Without immediately formulating a defense, because we see it as a personal attack. Okay. I mean, I'm talking about just hearing more than what is being said. I mean, it's fully engaging in that process of connecting with that person and evaluating the information that they are giving to you. Okay. And I think listening actively will help us do that, because it will also show that we're open to dialogue and we're genuinely interested in the other person's perspective. But most of the time, I mean, I hear this from the attendees in the trainings. I hear this from other people. I also did this myself. Okay. I wonder if sometimes I still do that, by the way. The first thing that I do at the sight of the slightest criticism, or let's say I did before, was to try to come up with an explanation. To, like I said, to formulate a defense on my mind.
And I have a follow-up question for you. So you and I were both presentation trainers. So how can we, as presentation trainers, equip our clients to deal with this problem? What skills do they need? What can we teach to them? How can we help them?
I think this listening actively would be the first step to start with.
Okay.
Another technique could be asking actually for clarification. Okay. Like, you've done your presentation. You think you have done your best and you're still receiving critical feedback or critical questions. And if they seem vague or ambiguous, let's say, I think it would be very important to ask for clarification instead of assuming that this person is saying this or this person is feeling this towards me. For example, you might say, I mean, I'm thinking, we might simply ask, could you please clarify what you mean by what you just said? Let's say you received a feedback saying that, well, this approach is ineffective. We can ask what they mean actually by ineffective approach. I mean, it's a broad term. It's a broad word, adjective. Okay.
And I have I have one more question for you before we wrap up, and that's about we as trainers preparing our clients for this kind of moment or this kind of reaction. One of the ways that I will typically do it is one of the ways that I will typically help a client prepare for this is that we will actually rehearse in our training what is some of the potential pushback that you are expecting with this idea. And before you go in and do this for real, let's practice how you're going to respond to that pushback. So we're basically simulating the response to the pushback. So that's what we do. That's actually a large part of our training. What do you do in your training sessions? What do you do to prepare your clients for this kind of situation?
For questions that they are anticipating, of course, it's easier to prepare for those. Instead of pushing them under the rug, I advise bringing them out into the open. Okay. If there is an elephant in the room to address, let's address it ourselves. before receiving pushback or even questions or comments from the audience.
Okay.
But for questions that are not anticipated, which can throw you off balance or out of your tracks, I strongly recommend these things, like first listening actively, asking for clarifications, and after that, when the time comes to actually open our mouth, stop for a couple of seconds.
Okay.
Fully articulate, let's say, the response that we want to give in our minds before responding. Because I think this pause is critical, because it will allow you to, let's say, separate the initial emotional reaction that you feel from the criticism. And it actually helps you to make sure that your response is based on facts and let's say logical reasoning, instead of your initial emotional response of, hey, no, this is not correct, this is not who I am, or this question is stupid or something. Of course, you should never say that, but I mean, you might be thinking that.
Yeah, that's generally.
There will be stupid questions from the audience, by the way.
Yeah, but you're right. That's one phrase that you should probably stay away from. That's a stupid question.
Yeah, I do not recommend. I do not recommend answering the audience in that way. But at the end of the day, I think if you do these things, like if you listen actively, if necessary, second, you ask for clarification of their question or criticism, and pause to articulate your response before speaking, I think you won't just be answering the question more effectively, but you will also show, some critical thinking skills. I mean, I think that's always a plus for you as a presenter or as a speaker.
Definitely.
And if you want, I mean, just thinking on the top of my head, if you want, after the presentation, you can find this person and seek his or her feedback.
True.
Like, do you feel your question was answered adequately? Do you think there is more I can do to do my research and come back to you, or something like that? I mean, actively seek that feedback to show that you're actually willing to go the extra mile to make sure that their concerns are addressed.
Good point. All right, so we've got to wrap it up for today. So before we wrap it up, is there anything else that you wanted to cover about this topic?
I guess at the end of today, we just need to grow a thicker skin when it comes to criticism or tough questions during the presentations. Yeah. I don't know how to do that, but it just needs to grow a little bit thicker.
Yeah, it's one of those things, definitely, that's easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, Alper, and I will talk to you next week.
Thank you. Talk to you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.